Hi, I'm Dan Knaus from Multidots, and this is the Publish Press podcast. I'm here with Steve Burge, founder and owner of Publish Press. How are you doing, Steve?
Hey, great. Thanks, Dan. So me and you have known each other a good long time now, but our guest today, I've known even longer. Me and Jen go back 20 plus years. We both used to be web design trainers, and Jen still is. Her experience as a web trainer spanned just about every era of the web. She started teaching CSS and HTML 20 plus years ago and is still doing it now. She fervently believes that that is the foundation that every web developer needs to know. And things like WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, Webflow, Squarespace, they come and go, but the essential skills remain. And so we ended up talking about her web design career, starting with in-person training through videos, through mixed classes, and then through massive, really popular classes on platforms like LinkedIn and Front-End Masters, and then ended talking about her newest project, which is helping survivors of trafficking to become junior web developers. I think you'll find this a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, there's a lot of fascinating information in there, and I think we got some really valuable tidbits from Jen's long experience in the educational space on what makes effective teaching, what makes a course really a good one that's going to have positive learning outcomes. So take a listen. This is a really enjoyable conversation we had.
Hey, Jen, welcome to the Publish Press podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Steve. Great to see you.
Equally, we have known each other, 20 plus years now.
Yep. Happy Joomla days.
Oh man, up through the all the ups and downs of the web, starting with me and you were training people how to use Joomla together.
We were.
And then HTML and CSS, Bootstrap, and now you've moved on through teaching at Harvard.
Yeah.
Teaching at LinkedIn, and now the era of no-code tools.
Yeah, which is great. Yeah.
But we haven't talked for a couple of years now. Do you mind catching us up on what you're doing right now?
Sure. So these days, I am the director of learning design and technology for Annie Cannons. It's a nonprofit boot camp that is devoted to serving human trafficking survivors. So our students have previously been trafficked, and we are teaching them job skills so that they can go on and make money and not have to ever go back into trafficking situations ever again. And our students come in, they go through our introductory course. As they get to the three so-called advanced modules, we actually pay them to come to class. They are paid $20 an hour, 25 hours a week to be in class to help basically help pay for apartments and food and all the rest of that so that they have time to study and get up to speed in the field. And then we do our best to get them placed into various internships or other jobs along the way and get them started as junior developers, junior software developers, full stack.
Oh, so how long is the course? How long is the boot camp they enroll in?
It's a little bit more than a year that they spend with us. So in addition to the introductory HTML, CSS, little JavaScript, they do React. They also do backend, specifically like Node and JavaScript and so forth, working with databases. And then they do an independent study where they can focus on expanding their skills into whatever direction they want, some of them decide that they don't really like coding and they want to go into project management. Others of them are just like, yeah, software engineering is it. I want more of that. So they go in a bunch of different directions.
So you've been doing this for a while. You've seen people graduate and look for jobs after this?
I have been there now for almost a year, just a few weeks short of a year at this point.
What kind of jobs are people ready for after they graduate?
They're ready for junior developer jobs. In terms of one of the things that we have at Annie Cannons are ticket systems and such. We actually build a little bit of software that's used in the human trafficking space. And so our students actually get real world experience working on tickets and contributing code to a real world product. So many of them will go on to internships with some of the companies that we work with, and some of them will find jobs on their own. It is not a good market for junior developers, as we all know right now.
Okay.
So yeah, some of them don't have anything immediately leaving any cannons, but we continue to work with them.
Okay, so if someone's listening to the podcast and is interested in hiring junior developers, you have a pipeline to some enthusiastic, well-trained people?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So this is a capstone of sorts to really quite a career that you've had through Harvard, through LinkedIn, through being an independent teacher.
Mm-hmm.
What does the market look like for being an independent teacher these days? I know people are out there hustling to get their courses on Udemy or looking to sell their courses on social media. What does the situation look like for someone trying to be an independent teacher these days?
Yeah, I think it's pretty tough at this moment in time. I think a lot of people see teaching as a way of making money, and those of us who grew up in education know nothing could be further from the truth. But at the same time, so back in the 70s and 80s, independent people who wanted to get noticed would write a book, and they would get an actual like paper dead tree book published somewhere, and that's how they became known in the consultant space. I think what we see today is that people think that, okay, so I'll have my Teachable or Kajabi class or something, or Udemy class, or I'll just start my YouTube channel and everyone will understand everything that I'm saying. One of the big drawbacks that I think is happening in that space is that education actually is a very well-established field that's been around for hundreds of years. We know how people learn, but we in the tech field are a little bit on the arrogant side and think that, oh, well, I know this thing, and of course I can teach it perfectly. But there's a lot actually to be gained by getting some background in how to teach in order to be really effective at what you do. There's a lot of non-effective teaching that's out there. So that would be the first piece of advice that I would have for people who think that they want to teach. Go read some books and go take some classes on how to be a teacher.
Yeah, back when we were running a training company and me and you were working together, we used to have an in-house motto that we would hire teachers and train them in web development, and that would generally produce a more effective teacher than taking a web developer and teaching them how to train. It's kind of innate that you have the patience or the ability to take a complex topic and explain it to people. And a lot of web developers just don't have that mindset, perhaps.
I think that's definitely true. And I think the other thing that makes a really effective teacher in the space is to go back and re-examine all of your preconceived notions. So you learned HTML somewhere along the way, and you have your opinions about whatever some certain element means and how it should be used. Go back and read the documentation. I can pretty much guarantee you're going to learn something new that you did not know previously. And then you can then bring to your teaching. So making sure that you actually understand what you're doing is really important, and not just sort of blowing off some of those questions that come from your students about why did you say more about that? Why did you say that thing? You have to be prepared for answers, and you need to be right.
Did you have a background in education before you got into the technical stuff, or how did you learn the teaching skills?
I'm one of those, like, teaching is actually how I learn. So when I was in high school, I taught flute lessons, music lessons. When I was in college, I tutored the students who were around me. When I was in grad school, I tutored the people who were around me. That's how I got to know my homework. If I could explain it to somebody else, then I felt like I had actually mastered things. And so, and I had spent all this money on graduate school. And when I graduated, became my immediate goal to earn back all the money that I had paid for my degree by teaching at the school where I had graduated from, at Marlborough College. So, I did that. So I achieved that goal a couple times over.
Nice.
Teaching there. So a lot of what I learned was actually along the way. While I was at Harvard, one of the wonderful things about being a Harvard employee is that you can take classes for $40 each through the Harvard
Oh,
Extension School.
Really?
So I said, cool. I'm going to go do a certificate in learning design and technology. And it was so eye-opening for me. One of the first things we did was read a book called Backwards Design. And I remember reading this. One of the things I had to do was take notes online. There was an online note kind of thing. And I kept making comments like, this is UX. This is UX. These are all the things that we do in UX. And then learning actually learning adult learning theory were thoughts that I'd had for years that actually brought together a whole lot of things that I'd thought about during that time. So yeah, it took me 20 years of teaching in the field to actually finally get my formal education. It made such a difference, and I wish I had done it years earlier. Yeah.
So you worked at Harvard as a HTML, CSS web design teacher?
And I taught a lot of, so I taught several courses on CSS and advanced CSS. I taught content management systems, which WordPress was part of that series. And I taught a lot of educational technology classes as well.
So the through line through 20 years or so seems to be HTML and CSS. That maybe the platforms, Joomla has come and gone. Maybe WordPress will come and go soon.
Right.
Bootstrap. You're on to perhaps a little bit of no-code tools now.
Yep.
But the one thing that's remained constant through all those years, through Harvard, through working at LinkedIn, through teaching the survivors now, has been HTML and CSS.
That's right. Because the three fundamental languages of the browser are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. When I started in 2000 working in this field, there was HTML. CSS wasn't really, it was around, but it wasn't a supported thing by a browser. And we were using Dreamweaver back in those days, Dreamweaver 3 specifically, when it was part of Macromedia, actually. So what I realized early on was if you stick with those fundamentals and you know the fundamental part of how the browser works, the other software is going to come and go, which it has. It was really, it was sort of like my first experience with software death when Dreamweaver left for other places. And I was really sad about it for 20 years until I found Webflow. Now I feel like I'm back to my younger self again. But
that's one experience every web developer has to go through, is the death of their first favorite tool. And if you're around long enough, like the three of us have, then we've experienced the death of our favorite tool several times.
Yes. Yeah. For sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse, but yes. Internet Explorer 6, we were really glad to see it go, but other things not so much.
If you think about those fundamentals, though, like HTML and CSS and JavaScript as your foundational tools, maybe there's less pain. Maybe there's too much change in some periods, but yeah, that's
right. But if you understand HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, if you understand how data it's moving around, right, between through APIs or back and forth to a database, or however the data is going, where it's stored and how it's being displayed, you actually have the foundation for whatever comes next.
So the actual, the through line of what you're teaching has changed on the surface, but fundamentally it's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that's been the through line for 20 years. What about the actual format? We started teaching in person 20 years ago, actually having people sit down in a computer lab with machines in front of them. But you've been through an ebook era, a YouTube era, a LinkedIn era. Can you take us through the different methods you've used to teach people over the years?
Sure. Yeah. Well, when I started again in 2000, there were no learning management systems for higher ed. So we would use AOL Instant Messenger, and we'd have we'd actually run chat class on occasion on AOL Instant Messenger. I remember building my static HTML websites in Dreamweaver to teach students. There were no other options, right? So So that's where we started, right? As we moved forward. Oh, and by the way, Marlboro was very much ahead of their time. They had a so-called hybrid format. So every other weekend we were in class. We were in class Friday night and all day Saturday. And then
So
Mhm.
for people that don't know, Marlborough is a university up in New Hampshire.
In Vermont, and
Okay,
unfortunately,
Vermont.
it's no longer with us. Talk about death of software. How about death of university? They did finally go out of business, unfortunately, like a lot of places in higher ed at this point. Small New England colleges that are in financial difficulties. So they left us, I think, around the pandemic.
Oh, so you were doing hybrid classes where the students would be at home, you were using AOL to talk with them, and then they would physically come into the university to have part of their education in person.
Every other weekend, yeah. So this was in the early 2000s, and we'd have people that, in some cases, would fly. I had a friend who took a train up from Pennsylvania, every other weekend, drive from all over to come and join us to be in person, and then they would go home again, and we would work on and try to collaborate like through what we had. So we had email, we had AOL, Instant Messenger, that kind of stuff. We'd collaborate sort of in between classes, which was good. It gave me a mental model really early on of how learning works remotely, and to have done it at that point in time. As time progressed, right, we eventually got learning management systems, and we got. By the time I got to Harvard Extension, I was one of the very first instructors in some of the first classes that were wholly online. In other words, where I would record. Yeah.
So the Harvard classes dispensed of the in-person aspect of it and moved entirely online?
And early on again. So this would be like 2012, 2013, when we were recording videos, like video lectures. I'd have students be coding along with me, like here's the starting files, follow along with the video, code along with me, kind of thing. And then coming up with assignments and ways for them to turn those in, all online. And that was shocking at the time. So this is the Harvard Extension School, which is designed to be, remote learning. And we had sometimes as many as 150 people in class.
Oh, wow. So this was a sizable jump from the initial Marlboro class.
Right. Yeah. And 10 years further from Marlboro. Yeah. Yep. So
you moved to fully online classes really quite early on. I mean, the technology wasn't even really available back in 2012 to do this very easily.
Yeah, Harvard had built their own platform at that point in time, which was truly, truly awful. I would record videos and I'd put them on Vimeo, and then I'd have to like email this guy who would then put them in my class. But by 2015, we had Canvas, which is something of an industry standard at this point for higher ed. So then I was able to build out my own classes and experiment with what is effective, which is always really the question in teaching. What is effective? It's not right or wrong. What works? Yeah.
So around that time, I think me and you were dabbling in ebooks as well. Kindle and Amazon had a self-publishing system that worked quite well. You still have one or two ebooks available now from that era. Is it something that you can make much revenue from at this point? Do people buy ebooks for learning how to code?
There are always a group of people who say that that's what they want. Unfortunately, I think those numbers are going down. I think what you'll find is, in terms of books, that it tends to be the older generation of people who want to learn from a book as opposed to a video, one. Two, I think you'll find that people who are more advanced in their knowledge would rather have a book so that in other words, they can go right to the thing and look at it, as opposed to I have this however long video where I have to like fast forward to find the thing. Right. But increasingly it's all about video.
Okay. So there is a subset of people that will buy a tech book, but that's an increasingly small and diminishing. So from there you moved to LinkedIn, which probably gave you a substantial increase in your audience too, right?
Yeah, that was crazy. So I started with LinkedIn Learning when I was in 2008, when it was lynda.com.
Okay. And yeah, you were an early Lynda author, right?
I was. There were about 70 people that worked there. It was run by Linda Weinman. And what had happened was Joe LeBlanc had originally recorded a bunch of Joomla videos. I didn't know Joe at the time, but one of my Marlboro students actually sent me a link and said, "Hey, look, there's these new Joomla videos that are up on lynda.com." And I was like, wow, I thought she just did Adobe courses, which was mostly true at that point in time. Adobe and Macromedia, like Dreamweaver and stuff. So I took a look, and right on the page with Joe's new course was this little button that said call for trainers. You want to teach for us? So I clicked the button and I filled out the form thinking like, there's no way somebody's going to get back to me. They got back to me the next day, and that was my first Joomla course with them. And that was my onboarding to my whole LinkedIn thing. So I started off doing tons and tons of Joomla courses with them. I've moved into HTML and CSS and no code tools and so forth. So yeah, I've recorded at this point, I think 80 odd courses with them.
Seriously?
Over that time. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I knew you were prolific for them, but not quite that prolific.
Yeah. It's been a lot. It's been a lot of fun. In fact, I'm going there next week to record a new course. So there you go.
I was going to ask that because I knew back in the day, Lynda and maybe initially LinkedIn would fly you out to California to sit down in an expensive recording studio and bash out the courses.
Yeah. And they still do on occasion. Of course, the pandemic changed everything. So my favorite experience during the pandemic was I was asked to do the Introduction to Web Design and Development course, which is a really big course. It's foundational to everything. And normally I would have flown to California and been on a big soundstage. But it was a pandemic. We couldn't do that. So they actually shipped me boxes and boxes and boxes of equipment and lights and cameras and lenses and computers and all the things. And in my dining room, I set all of this stuff up. I had them on Zoom and they would tell me what to do, like move the light here, move the light there. So I was, as they said, I was both the gaff and the talent, moving all the stuff around, trying to get this together for the course. So if you watch it, it's the Introduction to Web Design and Development and LinkedIn Learning. That's my dining room.
But we're far enough away from the pandemic now that they can take you back to California again.
Yes. Everybody's back in person. Although it is much less. I have a recording system here at my house, and for most of the courses, I just record here from home.
Have you ever thought about teaching how to teach? It's largely this kind of meta conversation we're having
getting
here.
Meta.
And you kind of hinted that, there are some things that are effective and some that aren't, and things that make effective teachers and others just clearly not. Would you mind sharing some of that the secret sauce,
I can see the class now. What I learned from 100 LinkedIn classes.
What I learned from 100. So if I had to boil it down to two things, one would be so-called chunking. So what are the things we're going to teach, and what is the order in which we're going to teach them, right? So remember, we're going to end by being able to do a thing. You need to define that thing in technicolor detail, whatever the thing is. Then you can work back to where are we starting from? Who is your target learner? What do they have? What do they need for background? If they don't have the background, where should you send them to get that background before they take your course, right? And then we're going to chunk it in between. And one of the things that a lot of people are not doing right now on YouTube is that they're just like, hey, we're going to build a thing. Come on, let's go. Let's do the thing. But they don't give learners a chance to reflect on what they've done so far. So they present like, okay, here's 27 things in 15 minutes. There's no time for me to absorb any of that, right? It would be better if you actually chunked it into like, okay, so let's do this much. And now let's reflect on it. Okay, so the chunk that I just did in the last 5 minutes does this, doesn't do that. Would be cool if we did this next. So now you have a story that's building in your mind, right? So now I'm ready to, okay, so I know it does these things. It doesn't do these things. Let's add on. So here's how I take it to the next level. And then we can reflect again. Also giving people practice. That's really important as well.
So YouTube prioritizes a very rapid, quick fire form of learning that may not be ideal for most people.
I'm not sure I'd call it learning, but yes.
Attempted learning.
It's more like coding as entertainment, right? So let me put this thing together quickly, and you can see, and this is why people, I think, are so attracted to this concept of teaching, is because I can show how smart I am. And if you're coming from teaching from that perspective, I want to demonstrate how smart I am. You will never be an effective teacher.
It's a little bit like Duolingo when it comes to learning a language. It's entertaining and it's fast, but perhaps not quite so effective as sitting down, taking a more structured, steady approach.
Exactly. So, how much do you want to remember? This is one of the things that I've often told people is like, so what should people remember about this 2 years from now?
Do you have tools, or does LinkedIn have tools that allow you to code in the browser?
I believe they do now have some kind of coding environment for coding inside of the browser. But to be honest, I have not used it. I use CodePen.
That's got some interesting future there with WordPress Playground. That's WordPress VIP has started to use it a little bit, and some of their own new little LMS. I wouldn't be surprised to. I think it's starting to emerge in some of the WordPress training. There's a local guy at the unit. I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, the University of Alberta, which I think has quite a lot of WordPress stuff going on still, courses, and he's got code execution in video. I don't understand how this works. It sounds like a security nightmare in some ways, but you can actually execute code within a video that you're watching live or later on.
Okay, now you're having me intrigued, Dan.
That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
I've shared it in post status Slack, I think, recently, or some others, but we should. It occurs to me we don't really have, or I'm not tuned into an instructional, educational, pedagogical channel. I mean, there's WP Campus. We have a significant community that's kind of focused on building solutions in WordPress for the academic world. But actually, the trainers and teachers and learning theory, all of that doesn't. A lot of us have those kind of backgrounds. I taught writing courses primarily for a long time. Does that exist, or is that just sort of a missing thing? The how-to, because this is such valuable information from all the experience you have.
Yeah, well, it has occurred to me many times to put together, I don't know, video training, newsletters, something about like how people can become better instructors. And I keep going back to, but really, who's going to watch that?
That people just prefer to bang out the videos rather than take the time to learn how to make them better.
Yeah. It's more of a cult of personality than effective education.
So what topics really get people's attention on LinkedIn? You've got more than enough statistics available now, over 80 classes. Which are the ones that do well?
Yeah. So one of the classes that I really enjoyed putting together was practical HTML for no coders.
Okay.
So if you take a look at things like HTML and CSS, everything that's out there is oriented towards like you are a developer or you are going to become a professional web developer. Okay. Nothing is oriented towards I'm the digital marketing person, and like sometimes my WordPress, I copy paste from Microsoft Word and it's a mess in WordPress and I can't get that thing, in the editor. I'm trying to get that thing and I can't get the space out, and they need to know how to flip over to the HTML side and just read a few things, right? It's not every HTML tag. They're never going to write HTML from scratch. We don't need to talk about file management. We just need to know, like, within the context of a WordPress editor, what is that HTML? And like, it starts with a P and it ends with a /P. That's a paragraph. Right?
Or what's a skip link, anchor links, things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, so the no-code tools are increasingly popular. I imagine for a LinkedIn audience, for the business audience, Airtable, Webflow, some of those no-code tools are a big business for you.
Yeah. I have one course that's called No-Code Solutions for websites and web apps. Okay. And it is a survey course. I think the last time I did 31 different software packages. And so in 7 minutes or less, here's the software package. Here's the kind of thing that it does. Here's a couple of screens for what it does. Here's what they say it can do. Here's how much it costs. If you want to know more, Here's where you can go to their website. Just sort of like rapid
Interesting.
fire. So
Yeah.
just like that 30,000 foot view, like what is the difference between Squarespace and Wix and Webflow and WordPress.org.com, right? Let's look at all those things. And maybe if you watch that series of videos, maybe you could decide like, oh, well, WordPress.org is going to give me a lot of functionality, but it seems kind of difficult. Maybe I'd really rather go, maybe I don't care as much as how it looks, that I can edit it quickly and easily. Maybe I'd rather go in a different direction, right? So that was sort of my goal for that series of videos.
So feel free to tell me this is privileged information, but you get a really popular LinkedIn course. I mean, we were talking before, you have a Harvard course with, say, 150 people in a session, a small university class with, say, 20 or 30 people. If you have a popular LinkedIn class, do they tell you how many people might watch a class like it? How big does it get?
I think you can actually see it on their website if you are in the LinkedIn environment. Give me just a second here, Steve. I'll give you an answer to my most popular class here. Let's see. At least I can see it for sure. I'm pretty sure it's on the public interface. So if I go to Introduction to Websites here, Introduction to Web Design and Development, this one, maybe it doesn't tell me anymore. Oh, no, there it is. This says 108,637 people started learning my Intro to Web Design and Web Development course, and that 4,531 of them liked it.
Okay. Okay, so we've gone from 150 to, probably YouTube style numbers of
over 100,000 here, and then like in front end masters, I have an introductory boot camp that's been free and it's been up since 2018, and that's had hundreds of thousands of viewers as well.
Okay, so we've been talking about LinkedIn, which is perhaps more orientated towards the no-code area, even though it's a professional network.
Right.
That professional might include marketers or people who aren't looking to become professional developers. Whereas you also work with a company called Front End Masters, which is a lot more focused on training the potential pro developers.
Yeah, it's really focused on professional web developers who are looking to improve their skills to get to the next level. So in some cases, we have beginners who want to get into junior development, but a lot of people who subscribe to Front End Masters are already junior developers who want to move on to be senior developers or who want to move on to the levels beyond that. So the classes tend to be very advanced.
Oh, so Front End Masters is, I want to say, I saw you do some in-person classes occasionally for them, but is it now mostly a subscription online video site?
Yeah, so Front End Masters works a little bit different in that they always have me on site to record. You record in Minneapolis, downtown Minneapolis. There is a classroom. They have as many as 15 people in there at a time, and sometimes they're streaming as well. And then they take the workshop that you record, and then they'll edit it, and that becomes a course that then people can watch.
Unlike LinkedIn, you go there and you sit in a booth.
Right.
But Front End Masters, they actually have real human beings stand in front of you in a traditional style classroom, and they film that.
And ask questions, yes.
Interesting.
Which is good. Yep.
Hey, and so those topics go more in depth to the pro material.
Right.
And they also, by the sounds of it, are pretty popular too, hundreds of thousands of views.
Yes. Well, as I said, the boot camp was free. So that, of course, means that there are lots and lots of people that watch it. The courses that are behind the paywall don't get that many, but can still be popular.
Is that more enjoyable for you that has someone who came up as an in-person teacher to actually stand in front of an audience and have people to bounce off and ask questions of as you're teaching?
Yeah.
We've got me and you have been in the training business before for quite some time, and a lot of the people who did the training videos for us would get just inside their own head. They'd start to feel crazy after hours and hours of just talking to themselves. They'd hear their voice echoing around their brain.
Right.
Is it nice to have real live people in front of you to interact with?
Oh, it always is. I try to anticipate questions. People will always still surprise you and have questions about things that looking at things in a way that you've never looked at them before. So it is nice to have that classroom. But when I am recording for hours and hours and hours, talking to myself in a windowless room, I always imagine myself standing in front of groups of people and trying to anticipate what the questions are from that audience at that point in time. And people will tell me their feedback is, you were really good at presenting that information. And as I was thinking of that question, that's the thing that you answered. So it can be really helpful to have that visualization of that classroom and trying to anticipate if there were actually people sitting in front of you, what were the questions that they are asking at this moment in time. If you focus on the fact you're in a windowless room, it's not nearly as fun.
So even now, after 20 years, you're working with front-end masters and teaching people CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. How did you end up getting involved in the Annie Cannon's organization?
Well, actually, it was through Front End Masters. Front End Masters has donated to Annie Cannon's for some time. Our students have free subscriptions to their plan, and which is really great. And so I was aware of the name from that point in time. I started, I think, maybe 2 years ago, I had a meeting with them just to talk about like good practices for teaching, which was helpful to them. And then this job opened up and I applied for it, and they decided to hire me into it. So that's how that came about. Otherwise, I'm not sure I would have ever heard of them because we are a very small nonprofit in a very niche audience. So we are a little bit difficult to find.
So you get people who maybe are in a shelter, who need a new path in life, and do they come to you in person? Is this done in a particular physical location, or are you training them online again?
Everything is remote.
Okay.
And originally, Annie Cannon's was based out of the Bay Area and served Bay Area students. Yeah, then the pandemic happened, and just like everything else, they rolled online.
That phrase again.
Yeah,
the pandemic changes things.
Pandemic changed a lot for education. And so now we're able to serve more people across the country. So because of the fact that we do pay our students, they do have to all be U.S. citizens just for legal purposes. But our students are all over the United States, and so are our staff.
So if someone is in their position, they're starting almost from scratch. I presume most of the people you're training come in with little to no web knowledge.
Yes, actually, less than little to no. Some of them, in fact, we had one person who came in and thought that coding meant medical coding. So they're not even certain what they're coming to school for in some cases. So yeah, it's great.
Hopefully you let them down gently. But,
yeah, yep. No, this isn't anything medical. Although you could use it in a medical context, it's not really medical focused. Yeah.
So you see statistics these days that it's increasingly difficult or unwelcoming to be a junior developer because the opportunities are increasingly few and far between. You sound as if you're finding that to be a little true when it comes to the people you're training, that opportunities are increasingly rare for young people these days.
Yeah. So AI is doing a number on the business right now, right? So at some level we have. So I have a friend who teaches at Indiana University, a good friend of mine, who talks about the pervasiveness of AI with her students and like how she cannot get them to give up AI and actually focus on learning the material for the sake of learning the material. They just want to run everything.
This is in coding classes?
Yeah, in coding classes. The AI is a real problem. So that's one thing, right? So what employers say is, well, why would I hire somebody who's just going to go do stuff on AI anyway? I don't need people for that. I can hire anybody to go run things through AI, right? So, but fundamentally, even if AI is actually writing the code for you, you still have to know how to think about the problem, right? What is the thing that I'm trying to build? Where am I starting from? What are the steps to get there? And that is what a junior developer really absolutely needs to bring to the table, is that way of thinking about the problem, the way of how do I chunk something up? What do I need next? How do I know that AI did it right? All that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, AI is right now just a crutch. And we had a lot of discussions about this, even back in the Bootstrap days. What is Bootstrap? Is it a crutch or is it a productivity tool, right? So Dreamweaver, same thing. Is it a crutch or is it a productivity tool? Does it just let me go faster for what I already know how to do? Or is it, I can't do this thing without it? And yeah,
I'd say nearly all of our developers here at Publish Press use AI, but not to write code. They talk a lot about using it to generate ideas or give them a prompt when they're stuck. But actually writing the code, no.
right.
I hope at least they've mentioned any. We've talked about it quite a lot. They haven't admitted to using it to write chunks of code yet.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's where we are, is that this disconnect with junior developers thinking, well, I got to get this assignment done, so let me just run it through AI, and then I'm on to the next thing with no understanding of what I just did. And employers say, that's not who I need working for my company. So how do we start? How do we teach a junior developer to actually think about these problems? And then how do we market those people so that companies know that they're getting somebody who actually knows what they're doing?
Do you have a solution for that? You probably have fairly small classes with any cannons. You might have the ability to say, okay, I need you to avoid AI in this case. Talk to me about this.
Right. And that's pretty much where we are. Yeah. Because we have adults, 18 to 22-year-olds, always different, right? They just, in many cases, just want to go out and get their homework done, so they'll go out and have fun. These are adults who very well know why they're at Annie Cannons. And they know exactly what they're going from, and they know where they're going to. So we tell our students not to use AI and that this is better for them. They trust us.
They have a seriousness of purpose that a lot of young kids in boot camps may not.
That's right.
We have a staff member who kind of speaks to what you're talking about there, that he was basically our star support rep for a good number of years and wanted to become a developer. And he could never get anywhere with YouTube videos and AI prompts, and had to physically take time off work to go to a physical boot camp, one-on-one with a teacher, no distractions, face-to-face interaction. And that really kickstarted him in terms of understanding the basics and the concepts. He wasn't able to have the crutch of AI, and had much better training than he had been able to get on YouTube videos.
Right. Well, this is the biggest benefit that working with an instructor brings you, is that all the information is out there on the internet. That's absolutely true. But what order should you be doing it in? So, long story that I've told is, if you could start by just looking at job descriptions, what do I need to learn? Oh, I need to learn React. Great. I'm going to go learn React. Then you start learning React, and then, wait. There's some other things maybe I need to know before I'm ready to go there, right? So one of the things that a really good program can offer is the curation of what should you do first and second and third. Also focusing on the 80-20 rule, right? So there's lots of stuff out there in web development, but to be honest, like 20% of it is what you're going to use every day. And a good boot camp should focus on that 20%, because the other 80% is all edge cases. So if we do our job where we teach people how to think about the problem and how to solve the problem, and we're using the code that we're going to probably use most of the time, then our students should be able to investigate those edge cases on their own and learn how to apply them on their own.
So if people like the way you've been talking about this and want to either learn themselves or have someone who needs to learn the basics and become a junior web developer, is going to Front-End Masters like the best example of your CSS, HTML, JavaScript training available?
Yeah. In fact, if you go to Front-End Masters, frontendmasters.com/bootcamp, you can sign up for the bootcamp for free. I think it's just your email address. and you can watch all the videos. You can watch me there. I also have a class called Getting Started with CSS, which is also free at Front End Masters. Again, no subscription required, probably an email sign up. And that will give you a really good sense of my teaching if you would like to go register for either of those and have a look.
If you want to learn WordPress development, if you want to learn React, whatever you want to learn, you need to start with the basics.
Absolutely. Please start with the basics. Yeah.
Those were good 20 years ago, and those will probably be good in 20 years in the future.
They are the things that are changing. Although we continue to add to HTML and CSS, at its core, it remains the same and it remains backwards compatible, which is an amazing thing.
So, final question for you, and this is something we ask everyone that comes on the podcast. Is there a publisher or perhaps a teacher, someone that you follow whose work you really admire at the moment? Maybe if their newsletter drops in your inbox or a new video comes online, who is someone whose work you really have admiration for at the moment?
I have always been a fan of CSS Tricks. And of course, they are a WordPress. I believe they have a WordPress backend. Yeah.
Yeah.
So CSS Tricks has been a go-to resource for over a decade. And Front End Masters has also started a blog as well, which is also really good. Chris Coyer, who started CSS Tricks, is now working with Front End Masters on their blog. And so, yeah. So that's a really good one to watch. Not a lot of people are reading it just yet, but that's where Chris Coyer is now. And of course, CSS Tricks got sold, but they're starting to publish after a period of time with no publishing. They're back to publishing again.
Yeah, I've noticed that just in the last few weeks. Jeff Graham has put out a few really good things, and everyone's looking at it all of a sudden again. So that's positive.
Yeah, it's a really important resource. So I'm really glad it's back.
I know DigitalOcean were looking to sell CSS Tricks. They still own it?
As far as I know. I'm not involved with them in any way, but yeah.
Oh, so if you miss Chris's posts on CSS Tricks, then Front End Masters is the place to go now.
I believe the name of the blog is The Boost.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jen. I will drop in the show notes links to Chris's blog on Front End Masters, plus Annie Cannon's. If anyone is interested in hiring developers, hiring junior developers, then we have some good people for you.
Or make a donation.
That too. And I wish you all the best with your training work, Jen.
Thanks, Steve. It's great to catch up with you after all this time.